Most people spend their entire lives searching for the kingdom of God in all the wrong places. They look to churches, to heaven after death, to distant spiritual realms. They pray desperately for God to bring the kingdom into their circumstances. But Joel Goldsmith discovered something that changes everything. The kingdom isn't coming someday. It isn't somewhere else waiting to arrive. It's already here, within you, right now, this very moment. What happens when you truly grasp this truth? Your entire relationship with life transforms instantly. You stop begging an external God for help. You stop waiting for miracles to arrive from outside. You stop feeling like a powerless human hoping God notices your prayers. Instead, you recognize the infinite spiritual reality that already exists as your true nature. This isn't religious theory or philosophical speculation. It's mystical fact that Joel proved thousands of times. Joel taught that the kingdom of God is consciousness itself, not your human thoughts or emotions, not your beliefs or your religious practices, but the divine awareness that witnesses everything in your experience. The very consciousness reading these words right now is the kingdom. When you understand this deeply, something remarkable begins happening. Your problems don't get solved from outside through divine intervention. They dissolve because you see through the illusion that created them. The transformation isn't gradual improvement. It's a complete shift in identity. You discover you're not a limited human seeking God. You are consciousness itself, which is God expressing individually as you. Every single thing you've been searching for already exists in the kingdom that you are. This is what Joel dedicated his life to revealing. Let me share exactly what Joel meant by consciousness being the kingdom. Right now, there's an awareness in you that knows you're listening to these words. That awareness isn't your body. Your body is what that awareness witnesses. That awareness isn't your mind or your thoughts. It's what witnesses your mind thinking. This eternal witness, this pure awareness, is what mystics call Christ consciousness or Buddha nature. This is the kingdom. When Jesus said the kingdom is within, he wasn't speaking metaphorically or symbolically. He meant literally within your consciousness right now, not hidden in your heart organ, not stored in your brain somewhere, within the very awareness that's experiencing this sentence at this moment. That awareness is completely untouched by your problems. It's unlimited by circumstances. It's already whole, already perfect, already complete. Most people never notice this awareness because they're completely hypnotized by thoughts and circumstances. They live exclusively in the kingdom of effects, where problems seem absolutely real and separate from God, where healing must come from outside, where supply depends on economic conditions. But the moment you recognize consciousness itself as divine presence, you've found the kingdom. And everything changes from that single recognition. Joel spent decades helping people make this shift, not through complicated rituals or long spiritual practices, simply through recognition. The kingdom isn't achieved, it's recognized. And that recognition transforms everything about how you experience life, relationships, health, finances, and every challenge you face. Here's what Joel discovered through decades of spiritual healing work with thousands of people. When you realize the kingdom is already established within consciousness, you stop trying to change conditions. You stop fighting battles in the external world. You stop begging God to fix your circumstances. Instead, you rest in the kingdom that already is, perfect and complete, and watch circumstances naturally align with that inner reality. This sounds incredibly simple, but it requires a complete reversal of how you've been taught to live your entire life. You've been conditioned to fix problems, to make things happen through effort, to struggle and strive for improvement. The kingdom operates on completely different principles. It's already perfect. It's already complete. It's already expressing infinite good, unlimited supply, perfect health, and divine harmony in every area. Your job isn't to create the kingdom. Your job isn't to bring it into manifestation. Your job isn't even to make it real. Your only job is to recognize it, to acknowledge what already is. Joel called this recognition prayer, not asking God to do something for you, not visualizing outcomes or affirming prosperity, simply recognizing the divine reality that already exists as your consciousness right now. When you do this consistently, something Joel proved thousands of times happens. The external world begins reflecting the perfection that's always been present in the kingdom within you. Not through magic, not through wishful thinking, through spiritual law as exact as mathematical law. Consciousness recognized becomes consciousness expressed. Think about what this means practically in your life. You have a health challenge right now. The human approach is to pray desperately for healing, to ask God to please fix your body. But kingdom consciousness recognizes that in spiritual reality, in consciousness itself, you're already whole. Disease exists only in the world of material appearances, not in the kingdom of infinite life that is your true nature. When you rest in that recognition, not denying the appearance but seeing through it to the greater reality, something profound shifts. The body begins aligning with the truth you're recognizing. This isn't positive thinking trying to override negative thinking. It's not mind over matter. It's consciousness recognizing itself as the only power, the only presence, the only reality. And what consciousness recognizes, consciousness expresses. Joel proved this thousands upon thousands of times throughout his healing ministry. Cancers disappeared when people recognized kingdom consciousness. Supposedly incurable conditions vanished. Businesses on the brink of bankruptcy transformed into prosperity. Broken relationships healed completely. Not because Joel begged God for miracles, not because he had special powers others don't possess, but because he recognized the kingdom where those problems never existed in the first place. This is what happens when you truly understand what the kingdom is. You stop living from the outside in, where circumstances dictate your inner state. You start living from the inside out, where kingdom consciousness expresses itself as your daily experience. And the transformation is undeniable. Let me tell you about Margaret, a woman who attended Joel's classes in San Francisco in the 1950s. She had been diagnosed with a supposedly incurable degenerative condition. Multiple doctors confirmed the diagnosis. They gave her perhaps 6 months to live, possibly less. She tried everything medical science offered. She prayed desperately every single day. She begged God for healing. Nothing changed. The condition progressed exactly as doctors predicted. She was losing all hope when someone brought her to hear Joel speak at one of his Wednesday evening classes. Joel didn't pray for her healing that night. He didn't even focus on her disease or give her special attention. Instead, he taught the entire class about the kingdom within. He explained that in consciousness, in spiritual reality, disease has no existence whatsoever. Not because we deny it or pretend it away, but because the kingdom knows only wholeness and perfect life. Margaret was skeptical at first. How could ignoring her very real symptoms possibly help? But Joel explained she wasn't ignoring symptoms. She was recognizing something greater than symptoms, something more real than disease. She was recognizing the kingdom of divine consciousness as her true nature, where disease never existed and never could exist. Margaret spent the next 3 weeks doing nothing but this recognition. Every single time fear arose about her condition, she returned to kingdom consciousness. Every time symptoms appeared or intensified, she acknowledged them but recognized the greater reality within. She wasn't fighting disease. She wasn't trying to overcome it through willpower. She was simply resting in the kingdom that knows no disease. After 6 weeks of this practice, Margaret returned to her doctors for scheduled tests. They ran the tests 3 times because they couldn't believe the results. They found absolutely no trace of the condition that had been so clearly documented before. They called it spontaneous remission, a medical mystery. Joel called it recognition of what already is in kingdom consciousness. The disease had never existed in reality. It existed only in the world of material appearances. Margaret lived another 32 years after that diagnosis. She never experienced a return of the condition. But more importantly, she spent those 3 decades teaching others about the kingdom within consciousness. She understood that what happened to her wasn't a personal miracle. It was spiritual law operating exactly as it always operates when we recognize truth. Now let me share Robert's story. He was a businessman facing complete bankruptcy in the early 1960s. His company was 3 months behind on every payment. Creditors were threatening lawsuits. He had tried every business strategy known. He worked 16-hour days, trying to save his company. He prayed constantly for God to please send customers and money. His situation only worsened, despite all his desperate efforts. In absolute desperation, he attended one of Joel's intensive week-long workshops on kingdom consciousness in Hawaii. Joel told him something that seemed completely revolutionary and frankly impossible. Stop trying to demonstrate supply. Stop trying to make your business succeed through human effort. Instead, recognize that the kingdom already is infinite abundance. Not abundance coming to you someday if you're good enough, but abundance is the very nature of consciousness itself right now. This completely confused Robert at first. How could recognizing some invisible spiritual reality possibly help his very real business problems? Joel explained it this way. In the kingdom, there's no such thing as lack. Lack exists only in the world of human belief and human effort. When you recognize kingdom consciousness as your true nature, that recognition begins expressing itself as whatever form is needed. Sometimes that's business success. Sometimes it's a completely new direction you never imagined. Robert decided he had nothing to lose. He stopped all the desperate struggling and striving. He spent 2 hours every single day just recognizing the kingdom within, not asking for anything, not trying to fix anything, not outlining how God should solve his problems. Just pure recognition of consciousness as infinite abundance already present. Within 3 months, opportunities appeared that he never could have planned or forced into existence. A former colleague contacted him about a merger opportunity. New clients appeared seemingly out of nowhere. The business didn't just survive. It transformed into something far more successful than it had been before the crisis. But more importantly, Robert was completely free from the tyranny of depending on external conditions for his inner peace. Here's what these transformation stories reveal. The kingdom isn't a reward for good behavior. It isn't something you achieve after years of spiritual practice or moral perfection. It's the already present reality of consciousness itself right now. Every problem you experience exists only because you're looking at life from outside the kingdom, from the perspective of human limitation and separation from God. Joel taught that we live in 2 worlds simultaneously. The kingdom of divine consciousness, where everything is already perfect, already provided, already healed, already abundant. And the kingdom of human beliefs, where problems seem absolutely real and completely separate from God. Most people spend their entire lives trapped in that second kingdom, never discovering the first one that's been within them all along. But you don't have to leave one kingdom to enter the other. You don't have to go anywhere or become someone different. You're already in the kingdom right now. You've always been in the kingdom. You just haven't recognized it clearly. The moment you do recognize it, even for an instant, you experience what Joel called the shock of recognition. Life itself hasn't changed, but your perception of life has changed absolutely everything. The transformation happens gradually for most people. You have a powerful moment of kingdom recognition, then you forget and fall back into human thinking and worry. That's completely natural and normal. Joel worked with this understanding for decades before it became permanent and automatic in his consciousness. The key is simply returning to kingdom recognition again and again without judgment or discouragement. Each time you return to recognizing the kingdom, it becomes easier and more natural. Each time you recognize consciousness as divine presence, that recognition deepens and strengthens. You begin noticing synchronicities everywhere, what Joel called signs of the kingdom expressing itself in visible form. Challenges still appear in your experience, but they don't have the same power over you anymore because you know the greater reality that's always present. This is what happens when you truly understand the kingdom. You stop living from the outside in, where circumstances dictate your peace and joy. You start living from the inside out, where kingdom consciousness expresses itself as your daily experience. Not perfectly from day one, not instantly and completely, but progressively, consistently, and undeniably over time. If these kingdom revelations are expanding your spiritual understanding right now, like this video to help others discover Joel's life-changing teachings, subscribe for deeper mystical Christianity wisdom every week, and comment which insight resonated most powerfully with your own spiritual journey. Joel gave us extremely practical tools for recognizing the kingdom throughout your daily life. The first technique he taught is what he called the practice of the presence. Throughout your day, in the middle of ordinary activities, pause for just a moment and notice the awareness that's witnessing your experiences. That awareness witnessing everything is kingdom consciousness. You're not thinking about it intellectually. You're directly experiencing it as your true nature. When you're stuck in traffic feeling frustrated instead of staying lost in frustration, recognize the kingdom. When you're facing a difficult conversation that creates anxiety, before speaking, pause and recognize the kingdom. When fear suddenly arises about money or health or relationships, stop and recognize the consciousness that witnesses the fear arising. That consciousness is completely untouched by what it witnesses. It's not afraid. It can't be afraid. This isn't escaping from reality or denying what's happening. It's recognizing true reality underneath appearances. The kingdom is infinitely more real than circumstances could ever be. As you practice this consistent recognition throughout your days and weeks, something remarkable happens that Joel proved countless times. The circumstances begin naturally conforming to the kingdom reality you're recognizing, not through force or manipulation, not through you trying to make things happen, but through spiritual law operating as precisely as gravity or mathematics. What consciousness recognizes, consciousness expresses. When you recognize the kingdom within, the kingdom begins expressing itself as harmony in your visible circumstances. This is spiritual law Joel dedicated his entire life to proving and teaching. Another powerful technique Joel taught is what he called releasing mental arguments. Most people constantly argue with reality inside their minds. They mentally rehearse difficult conversations before they happen. They worry obsessively about possible negative outcomes. They replay problems over and over. These mental arguments keep you completely locked out of kingdom consciousness because they continuously affirm the reality and power of the problem. Kingdom recognition requires stopping these mental arguments entirely. When you catch yourself mentally fighting with circumstances, just stop. Don't try to replace negative thoughts with positive thoughts instead. That's still staying in the mental realm. Simply return to the pure awareness of consciousness itself, watching the thoughts. The kingdom doesn't argue with appearances ever. It simply knows its own reality completely. Joel discovered through years of observation that most human suffering comes not from actual circumstances, but from our endless mental commentary about circumstances. A bill arrives in the mail. That's simply a fact. But the mental storm about the bill, the worry about paying it, the fear about what it means, the imagined catastrophes it might lead to, that's what creates suffering. The kingdom remains perfectly peaceful regardless of facts. When you stop arguing mentally and rest in kingdom consciousness, you're not denying the bill exists. You're recognizing something infinitely greater than the bill. And from that recognition of the kingdom, divine wisdom naturally arises about how to respond appropriately, not from fear or external pressure, but from the infinite intelligence that is the kingdom itself expressing as your consciousness. Joel also emphasized what he called recognizing spiritual identity. This is crucial for understanding the kingdom. You're not a limited human being trying desperately to reach God somewhere outside yourself. Your consciousness itself, which is God expressing individually and uniquely as you. The kingdom isn't something you possess like an object. You are the kingdom expressing itself in unique form right now. This single recognition changes absolutely everything about prayer and spiritual practice. You're not asking an external God somewhere in heaven to please intervene in your life down here. You're recognizing that consciousness, which is God, is already your life right now. The kingdom isn't somehow running your life from outside. The kingdom is your life itself when you recognize it as such. Think about it this way that Joel often used. A wave isn't separate from the ocean desperately trying to become ocean. The wave is already ocean expressing itself as wave. You're not separate from the kingdom trying to enter it someday. Your kingdom consciousness already expressing itself as your individual experience. The very moment you recognize this clearly, the painful sense of separation dissolves completely. Joel called this the great secret of mystical Christianity that most churches completely missed. Jesus wasn't teaching people how to get to heaven someday after they die. He was revealing that heaven, the kingdom, is the present reality of consciousness itself right now. And when you recognize this truth, even while appearing in human form on earth, you live in heaven now, not someday, now. Here's a specific daily practice Joel recommended to thousands of students. Set aside 15 minutes twice daily, morning and evening, not to pray for things you want, not to visualize outcomes or affirm prosperity statements, simply to recognize the kingdom. Sit quietly and notice the consciousness that's aware of your breathing, aware of your thoughts arising, aware of your body sitting there. That consciousness is the kingdom itself. As you rest in this pure awareness, thoughts will inevitably come. Let them come and go naturally. Circumstances and problems will intrude on your mind. That's completely natural. But keep gently returning to the awareness itself, the consciousness witnessing everything. This is what Joel meant by recognition prayer. You're not trying to achieve anything or become anything different. You're simply recognizing what already is right now. Joel made this promise repeatedly. If you do this practice consistently for 30 days without missing, you will absolutely begin noticing changes. Not because you've created changes through mental effort, but because kingdom consciousness naturally expresses itself as harmony in your experience when you recognize it regularly. Some changes will be internal, profound shifts in how you perceive and experience life. Others will be external, circumstances aligning differently than before. The key is absolute consistency without expectation of specific results. You're not practicing kingdom recognition to get things. You're practicing it simply because it's true. The kingdom is the reality right now, regardless of appearances. When you recognize truth purely for its own sake without ulterior motives, truth automatically transforms your experience. That spiritual law Joel proved thousands upon thousands of times throughout his ministry. Now let's address honestly the challenges you will definitely face in recognizing the kingdom. The biggest obstacle to kingdom consciousness is what Joel called the hypnosis of appearances. Your physical senses report problems as absolutely real. Your bank account shows specific lack. Your body signals disease through symptoms. These material appearances seem infinitely more real than some invisible spiritual reality you can't see or touch. Joel called this the universal hypnosis affecting all humanity. We're all conditioned from birth to believe that the material world is the only reality, and that consciousness is somehow secondary or dependent on material conditions. Kingdom understanding completely reverses this fundamental assumption. Consciousness is reality. Consciousness is cause. Material appearances are effects of consciousness, not causes of anything. But you can't just intellectually believe this reversal. Your entire nervous system, your whole lifetime of conditioning, screams constantly that the problem is real and solid, and God is the abstraction. This is why kingdom recognition requires tremendous patience and persistence. You're literally deprogramming decades of hypnotic conditioning, not just learning a new spiritual concept or technique. Joel was completely honest about this. He told students it took him years of consistent practice before kingdom consciousness became his automatic response instead of human reaction. But he also promised that every single moment spent in kingdom recognition weakens the hypnosis and strengthens your awareness of truth. Progress is absolutely inevitable if you persist. Another major challenge is what Joel called taking thought. The human mind desperately wants to figure out how God will solve the problem. You recognize the kingdom for a moment, feel peaceful, then immediately start mentally planning how circumstances will change. You begin outlining what God should do. This mental planning takes you right back out of kingdom consciousness into human strategizing and control. The kingdom operates entirely by grace, never by human planning or control. When you recognize consciousness as the kingdom, divine intelligence already knows perfectly what needs to happen. Your mental strategies and plans actually interfere with grace flowing naturally. Joel discovered that the less he tried to outline how healing should occur, the more freely and perfectly it happened beyond anything he could have planned. This requires tremendous trust that most people find extremely difficult. You must recognize the kingdom clearly and then wait, not passively, but actively resting in that recognition while remaining alert. Joel called it watchfulness. You're not anxiously waiting for results to appear. You're watching carefully to keep your recognition of the kingdom clear and undistracted by appearances and fear. Most people give up right here at this crucial point. They recognize the kingdom faithfully for a few days or weeks, see no immediate external changes, and conclude it doesn't work for them. But Joel taught that kingdom recognition always works, operating on its own timetable. Sometimes results appear instantly. Often they come gradually. but they always come when you persist in recognition without forcing outcomes. There's also the challenge of intense emotional resistance. Kingdom consciousness can feel completely impractical and useless when you're genuinely terrified about money or devastated by relationship loss. Your emotions scream for immediate action, immediate solutions, immediate relief. The quiet recognition of spiritual reality seems weak and ineffective compared to emotional urgency. Joel acknowledged this challenge completely and never minimized human pain or emotion. But he discovered something absolutely crucial through his own experience and working with thousands of people. Emotions are not enemies of kingdom consciousness. They're simply energy moving through consciousness. When you recognize the kingdom while simultaneously feeling fear, something remarkable happens. The fear loses its power to dictate your actions and decisions. You're not suppressing emotion or pretending to be spiritual while secretly terrified inside. You're feeling the fear fully and completely, while simultaneously recognizing the consciousness that witnesses fear arising. That consciousness, the kingdom, isn't afraid. It can't be afraid. Fear appears in it exactly like clouds appear in sky, but the sky remains completely untouched by clouds. This dual awareness, feeling human emotion while recognizing divine consciousness, is what Joel called living in the kingdom while appearing in the world. You don't deny human experience or pretend it doesn't exist. You recognize something infinitely greater than human experience as your true nature. And that recognition transforms how you respond to emotion rather than react from emotion. Joel also warned seriously about spiritual ambition. Many people approach kingdom consciousness as a technique to get what they want. They recognize the kingdom hoping to manifest supply or healing or relationship success. This subtle using of spirituality for human purposes keeps you completely locked out of the kingdom's transformative power. The kingdom is not a tool for human improvement or achievement. It's a complete shift in identity. You're not a human using kingdom consciousness to get things. Your kingdom consciousness appearing temporarily in human form. When you recognize this accurately without mental manipulation, human desires begin dissolving into divine purpose. You still have preferences and goals, but they're not desperate attempts to complete an incomplete self. This is perhaps the most challenging aspect of kingdom understanding that Joel emphasized. He spent years discovering that every single time he approached consciousness as a means to an end, absolutely nothing happened. But when he recognized consciousness simply because it was truth, with no ulterior motive, profound transformations followed naturally and effortlessly. You must examine your own motives honestly. Are you recognizing the kingdom to get healing or money or success? Or are you recognizing it because it's true regardless of outcomes? This distinction seems subtle, but it's absolutely everything. The kingdom reveals itself only to those who seek it for itself, not for what it can provide. If these challenges are helping you understand kingdom consciousness more deeply and honestly, like to support this teaching, subscribe for advanced Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment which obstacle you're ready to recognize through with completely new awareness. Let me share an advanced application Joel taught for relationships and conflict. When facing interpersonal conflict, most people try desperately to change the other person or protect themselves from harm. Kingdom consciousness approaches conflict completely differently. You recognize that the other person is also kingdom consciousness appearing in form, even if they don't know it themselves. This doesn't mean accepting harmful behavior or allowing yourself to be abused. It means seeing through the behavior to the consciousness beneath it. Joel discovered that when you hold this recognition steadily, without trying to change anything or anyone, conflict often dissolves naturally. Not because you manipulated it spiritually, but because kingdom recognizing itself in both people creates space for truth to emerge. He had a student whose business partner was apparently defrauding him of thousands of dollars. Every lawyer he consulted advised immediate aggressive legal action. Instead, Joel taught him to recognize kingdom consciousness as the true identity of both partners, not denying the fraud, not pretending it wasn't happening, but seeing beyond it to spiritual reality underneath appearances. The student practiced this recognition faithfully for 3 weeks, never confronting his partner, never taking legal action, just recognizing kingdom consciousness as their shared reality. What happened shocked everyone involved. The partner voluntarily came to him, confessed everything completely, made full restitution without being asked. and the business relationship transformed into something far more honest and successful than it had ever been before. Kingdom consciousness also completely transforms how you relate to your physical body. Most people see their body as a vulnerable material thing that consciousness somehow inhabits temporarily. Kingdom understanding reverses this entirely. Consciousness doesn't inhabit the body. The body is consciousness expressing itself in visible form. Your true body is spiritual and completely indestructible. Joel wasn't denying that we have physical forms or suggesting we ignore symptoms and refuse medical treatment. He was revealing that the physical form is the effect of consciousness, not the cause of anything. When you recognize consciousness as the kingdom, that recognition begins expressing itself as body harmony. Not always instantly, but consistently and progressively over time. He taught people to stop monitoring symptoms constantly, which only reinforces material consciousness and gives power to appearances. Instead, recognize the kingdom several times daily, then trust completely that consciousness is maintaining its own expression as your form. This isn't Christian Science denial of matter. It's mystical recognition of what's truly real versus what only appears real. One student had experienced chronic, debilitating pain for 7 years. Multiple doctors offered no real solution. After learning kingdom recognition from Joel, she spent 3 months simply recognizing consciousness as her true nature, not trying to heal anything, not focusing on pain at all. The pain gradually diminished week by week, then disappeared completely. Doctors found no medical explanation. Joel knew the explanation was consciousness recognizing itself as the only reality. Here's how kingdom consciousness applies practically to work and finances. The human approach is simple. Effort creates results. Work hard, earn money, achieve security through human activity. Kingdom consciousness sees it completely differently. Consciousness expressing itself as your unique talents and purpose naturally attracts whatever is needed for consciousness to fulfill its intention through you. This sounds dangerously impractical until you understand what Joel actually meant. He wasn't suggesting you stop working or become passive waiting for money to fall from sky. He was revealing that when you recognize the kingdom as your source, your work becomes grace expressing itself instead of human striving. You still take action, but action flows naturally from recognition rather than from fear or lack. Joel himself demonstrated this principle throughout his entire ministry. He never advertised his classes, never promoted himself or his books, never asked anyone for money. Yet people came from around the entire world to study with him. Publishers sought him out. His books sold millions of copies. He recognized consciousness as infinite supply, and supply appeared in forms he never could have planned or manipulated. You can apply this starting immediately. Before work each day, recognize the kingdom for 5 minutes. Throughout your workday, pause briefly every hour to remember consciousness as your true nature. Watch carefully how your experience of work transforms. Not necessarily the tasks themselves, but your relationship to them and the unexpected opportunities that begin appearing naturally. Kingdom consciousness also reveals profound truth about death and immortality. Most people fear death as the absolute end of existence. Some religious people hope for heaven as reward after death. Joel taught something completely different based on direct mystical experience. Consciousness, which is the kingdom, is eternal and has no beginning or ending. What we call death is simply consciousness, withdrawing from one particular form. But consciousness itself never dies. When you recognize the kingdom as your true nature, the fear of death loses its power completely. Not because you're convinced intellectually of an afterlife, but because you know yourself directly as consciousness itself, which has no beginning or ending. This isn't a comforting belief. It's direct recognition of what you actually are underneath the appearance of being a temporary body. Joel had many students facing terminal diagnoses who came to him seeking healing. He never promised physical healing or suggested that death was failure. Instead, he taught them to recognize kingdom consciousness as their true identity beyond the body. Many experienced complete physical healing. Others transitioned peacefully, completely free from fear, knowing themselves as eternal consciousness, simply taking off one temporary form. This is perhaps the ultimate gift of kingdom understanding. You discover that what you truly are cannot be threatened by anything whatsoever. Circumstances come and go. Bodies are born and eventually die. But consciousness, the kingdom, remains eternally itself. When you know this directly through recognition, not as belief but as living experience, you're absolutely free from the fear that dominates most human lives. Now let's explore how kingdom consciousness handles what appears as evil or injustice in the world. This troubled Joel deeply for years. If the kingdom is perfect and already present, why does evil appear? Why do innocent people suffer? His answer revolutionizes how you respond to darkness. Evil has no existence in the kingdom. It exists only in the world of human belief and material appearances. When you recognize kingdom consciousness, you're not denying that harmful things appear to happen. You're recognizing that appearances are not reality. The kingdom knows only good, only God, only love. This recognition doesn't change facts instantly, but it changes your relationship to facts completely. Joel taught that meeting evil with kingdom recognition is infinitely more powerful than fighting evil with human effort and force. When you recognize the kingdom where evil doesn't exist, that recognition becomes a light-dissolving darkness. Not metaphorically, literally. Consciousness recognizing its own perfection dissolves the false belief in evil's power. He had countless examples of this. A student facing a violent attacker who recognized kingdom consciousness and watched the attacker walk away confused. Another student whose business faced destructive competition who recognized the kingdom and watched competitors become cooperative partners. This isn't magic. It's consciousness recognizing itself where only itself exists. Kingdom consciousness also transforms how you experience time itself. Most people live trapped in psychological time, constantly worrying about future or regretting past. The kingdom exists only in the eternal now. When you recognize consciousness, you're automatically in the present moment because consciousness has no past or future. Joel discovered that most problems exist only in psychological time. You worry about money that might run out in the future. You fear disease that might develop. You regret mistakes from the past. But in this actual moment, in pure presence, most problems don't exist. The kingdom is always now, and in the now, consciousness is always complete. This doesn't mean ignoring practical planning. It means recognizing that the kingdom supplies whatever is needed in each moment as each moment arrives. You plan wisely, but don't live in anxious future projection. You learn from the past, but don't live in regretful past identification. You live in kingdom consciousness now, trusting that now is always provided for. One student constantly worried about retirement decades away. The worry destroyed his present peace completely. Joel taught him to recognize the kingdom now, trusting that consciousness would provide whatever was needed when that future moment arrived as now. The student practiced this for 6 months. Not only did his present peace return, but opportunities appeared that made his financial future secure beyond what worry could have created. Let's address what happens when kingdom recognition seems to fail. When you recognize consciousness faithfully, but circumstances don't change or even worsen. Joel was honest about this challenging experience that every serious student faces eventually. Sometimes delay happens for reasons beyond our understanding. Sometimes our recognition isn't yet deep enough. Sometimes the challenge is necessary for deeper understanding to develop. Joel taught that you must never judge kingdom recognition by immediate results. The temptation is to treat spirituality as a vending machine. Put in recognition, get out healing. But consciousness operates by grace and wisdom, not human timetables. What seems like delay might be divine timing. What seems like failure might be redirecting you towards something better than you imagined. He told a powerful story of a woman who recognized kingdom consciousness faithfully for her marriage for 2 years, with no apparent improvement. She felt like a complete failure spiritually. Then suddenly her husband's heart opened completely, and their marriage became more beautiful than ever before. Later he told her something shifted in him exactly when she had wanted to quit recognizing truth. The key is recognizing kingdom consciousness because it's true, not because it produces results you want. When you recognize truth for itself, results follow naturally even if delayed. When you recognize truth only to get results, you're not really recognizing kingdom consciousness at all. You're trying to use spirituality for human purposes, and that never works. So what happens when you truly understand what the kingdom of God is? Everything changes, yet nothing changes. You're still in the same body, same circumstances, same world, but you're experiencing it all from kingdom consciousness instead of human limitation. Problems still appear, but they don't have the same power. Challenges arise, but they don't destroy your peace. Death approaches, but it doesn't create fear. You've discovered your true identity as consciousness itself, not the limited human you believed yourself to be, not a powerless victim of circumstances, but kingdom consciousness appearing in temporary human form. This recognition becomes your permanent home, your constant refuge, your unshakable foundation. Joel's final gift to humanity was proving that kingdom consciousness isn't reserved for special people or spiritual masters. It's your birthright. It's what you already are. You don't become kingdom consciousness through years of practice. You recognize what you've always been, but never noticed. This is the moment of recognition. Right now, the awareness reading these words is the kingdom, not the thoughts about the words, the awareness itself. That awareness is untouched by everything it witnesses. That awareness is your true nature. That awareness is God expressing as you. Welcome home to the kingdom you never left. If your spiritual understanding has been completely transformed by these Joel Goldsmith revelations about the kingdom, like this video so others can discover this truth. Subscribe for more life-changing mystical Christianity teachings, and comment, "I am Kingdom Consciousness," to declare your recognition of what you truly are.